And we are live. Hey, this is going to be a fun one, I think. It's going to be an exploration sort of generations and of how cinema played a role in those various generations. It'll be curious as we start teasing this out to see if Arthur and I come to any agreement or maybe come to loggerheads on the idea of were these directors, because we're going to primarily be focused on directors tonight rather than movies, but were these directors the result of their time within Americana? Were they actually influencing American thought and American ideas? Were they agents of chaos? Are they currently agents of chaos? Or is there something deeper going on there? So I'm super excited about this one. I think it's just kind of a fun, off the cuff one. It's one of these conspiracy theories that I've been brewing up in my head. So the gist of it for me is that when you start talking about who were the main directors, I'm in no way tonight am I arguing for artistic viability or anything like that. I'm talking about mass market appeal, and I'm talking about somebody that everybody knows of. They know their work and they can talk about it, probably without even doing a deep dive. But we've got a friend of the show, Arthur, on, so I know he put some time into studying these guys and getting his thoughts on this. But I think if you go back and you look at generational directors, again, we're looking at mass market appeal. We're looking at acceptance and this viability of American thought in that moment. So I think with baby boomers, the one that you have to go with is John Hughes. Whether it is Ferris Bueller or Breakfast Club, whether it is the Home Alone movies, he starts pairing up with Christopher Columbus, and I think as we go through this, you'll see different shifts in there. But you can make a lot of arguments. I think that this is the man that represents so much of the baby boomer idea and identity. Give me just a second. I'm going to actually add in Hazard's Ghost. We've got a surprise guest this evening. Let's see. Mr. Ghost, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. All right, so I'm going to finish doing a bit of a monologue and then we'll jump into it. The big thing right now that I've jumped in with is just I think we start picking out these directors, not based on any sort of avant-garde reasoning or anything. I'm just looking for mass market appeal. These guys were the ubiquitous ones. They're within their time, and so for baby boomers, my big one is John Hughes. I think you can also make an argument for Dagum Oliver Stone. There, he is almost the same message as Hughes, but he comes at it where Hughes is coming from the family in the Midwest and these warm ideas. Stone is coming at it from, this sort of independence idea, and very, very much in my mind, a continuation of hippie thought and those foundational ideas within the baby boomer generation. I think that moves. So the if we could encapsulate that, we would say that the baby boomer generation within cinema is, hey, we can be anything. We could be anything. We could do anything. We move in then to Gen X, and there's a big crop of Gen X guys, but the one that in my mind caught the moment, caught the zeitgeist, and represented it was Judd Apatow. He starts back in Freaks and Geeks, and he builds off of that. And I think the through line in all of his features is this idea of what next, why, what is going on, and we see that. Well, I need not to dig too deeply into the various films, but we see that again throughout his library. If we keep following this thought, so we've had we can be anything, and then we have what's next, or we have why. I think the last one we jump into the millennials in, and for me, even though he's not super popular, I do think that he is the one that is maybe this is a fault of being online too much, but who is capturing some of the millennial ideas and at least putting a voice to them. And we'll get into it later, whether I think it's the appropriate voice or he's recognizing the true things. But I think Agers is really the one that comes in and says, yeah, whatever. You guys are saying we can be anything. Gen X is asking why. And over here, as a millennial, I could say it really doesn't matter. Nothing matters. And I think we chase a through line through that. So that's the thesis, that's the monologue. But Arthur, if you want to open us up and just in general, what do you think of sort of that grand idea? Do you think there's any meat on those bones?
There's definitely a discussion to be had about it. When you brought up the topic of this and kind of gave me the structure, especially with John Hughes kind of being the main representative of the boomer, you can do it style of director. I started researching into it, and one thing that I kept coming back to, especially with John Hughes on that mindset, you have to recall he was born in '50 in Lansing, Michigan, and moved with his family up to that area outside of Chicago in a not a wealthy suburb, but upper middle class. His father did very well, and he kept going back to the themes of growing up in that middle America suburban environment, and he had very warm feelings about that. And it shows in his work that movie that he was involved with, uh, that has a bad ending. I mean, can we all agree about that? It'll have some ups and downs. I mean, from trains and automobiles, Some Kind of Wonderful, The Breakfast Club, Weird Science. You pick a movie that he was a part of, they don't have a sad ending. There's not a huge tragedy at the end. He kind of has those, as you
I
point out,
think
that kind of guardrails on his films.
the
Things are going to work out.
the maybe the darkest one I could think of would be St. Elmo's Fire, and it's not even that it's dark, but it is this: we've grown up, we're growing apart, we're growing into our different lanes, and so it still comes back to that idea of we can be whatever we want to be, and we can define who we are. But I also think, and this might be reaching hazard, I'd like you to jump in on this one. I think you can almost trace a line too through the movies he made earlier on in his career, and then as he gets towards the end. Because I think what you were hitting on, Arthur, about the suburbs and recognizing family and sort of coming back to a rooted position and all of it, I think we see that a lot more towards the end of his career. I think the easiest jumping in point with that would be the daggum Home Alone movies.
One quick correction: that St. Elmo's Fire, that was Joel Schumacher. Yeah, John Hughes didn't have any part of that one though.
He wasn't producer on that one.
Looking through here, director Joel Schumacher, screenplay Schumacher.
Well, then, yeah, fair enough. I bombed that one.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
I gotta say, I'm a little on my depth on like exact producers and even directors to an extent, but I do like this through line that you're talking about of the boomers thought that they could do anything.
Well, we got to be real careful now that I bombed St. Elmo's Fire.
My bad.
Thanks, Arthur.
No, you're fine. No, but then just I do agree with the through line of like the sort of boomers thinking that they can do anything and that it really shines to their movies. And then, like what you said, the Gen Xers sort of have this like crisis of identity. And then the millennials are definitely like this sort of post-irony that we see shine through. Although post-irony with a lot of nostalgia. I think that's another element that might be a tad under discussed.
Interesting.
And, yeah.
All right, very good. Well, so let's, and now, because I'm scared I'm going to shoot myself in the foot, I'm actually going to pull up his daggum list. Plus, it'll just be good to have a visual representation. So you guys talk for a minute, no dead air, and I'm going to work on pulling up a visual list of his movies.
Sure.
So real quick on to continue on with John Hughes. One thing I found out looking through this that surprised me, I thought he had directed a lot more movies, but looking through his filmography and the listings, he was only the director of 8 movies. He was a writer for over 30 movies, and he produced 16 of them. And in conjunction, there was quite a few that he had been, the director, the writer, the producer, and had, full control over the movies. But even in the ones that he wasn't directing, I had false memories of thinking, well, wait, yeah, he directed that. And then going back, going, oh, no, he just was the writer and the producer. But his influence was still so strong that it was still a John Hughes movie. Whoever the director was, it was just a no name that you wouldn't remember anymore. It had the John Hughes kind of perspective of it. And that was really interesting to me, how much influence he had over the movies. But, for me, elder millennial, the funny thing about all these movies that came out when they initially came out, I wasn't watching them. If I was alive, I was still, figuring out.
Yep.
Well, we're on repeat, and I'm sure you guys remember this as well, that these movies, John Hughes movies, all these Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, TBS, pretty much every other afternoon, there would be a variation of his movies of the 80s on. And, if you had siblings or, family members around that always talked about, oh, that's my favorite movie, I watched it in high school. And you're like, great, Brenda. Yeah, you're old. But still, you would go and watch it, and you would kind of, still capture a bit of that magic that he put into it.
Yeah. I know the big one on here for my dad, frankly, I'm a little bit surprised because Hughes was also interesting in that, at least in our household, I wouldn't say so much he got a pass in some ways. My parents were pretty strict with stuff, the media that went in front of us. But yeah, I think Breakfast Club might have been the first R-rated movie I was allowed to buy. And then, man, I don't even know if I was probably like 8 or 9 when Dad brought in Uncle Buck, and he just thought it was the most hilarious thing. And I think a part of that was there was Hughes out of all of them that we've got. That's not quite fair to Apatow, but Apatow's a little bit different. I was going to say I think Hughes is probably the most sincere out of the directors that we're looking at tonight. I don't think that's the whole truth when we look at Apatow, but there are no airs with Hughes. There's no pretense, seemingly. Maybe he was a bastard. I don't know, but that's not how his films ever come off.
No, there's genuine to his films. They don't come off as kitsch or, smarmy. Even to this day, to me at least, like I can still sit down and watch The Great Outdoors, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, Some Kind of Wonderful. I mean, never really got into The Breakfast Club that much. I guess I just that time period and the atmosphere there just never kind of connected with me too much. But it's not a bad film, but still, it is a product of its time a bit there. But
it is.
He's genuine.
Well, I know for me now, I'll put on airs and sound like a right bastard. I really enjoyed The Breakfast Club as a kid, like I don't know, 13, 14 till I was like 19, 20, and then I was this is awful. I was looking at all the people around me. Well, it's like, did you ever see Donnie Darko? Because maybe this will make more sense if I was looking at the people that like The Breakfast Club and the people that like Donnie Darko. I was like, I really don't like you people. So I popped smoke and tossed both of those DVDs. It wasn't even the movie as much as just the people that clung to those. I was like, oh, is this who I'm becoming? So then I tossed them. I don't know. Well, so Abbott, which movie is it tripped? Donnie Darko? Abbott just jumped in. I think he might be talking about Donnie Darko. Maybe he's talking about The Breakfast Club. It's still a trip too. So before we move on, I've got a stupid question for both of y'all. Before we move on to Apatow, where are we at on Molly Ringwald?
Which way do you want to go with that?
However you want, Arthur.
Well, I'm sure the audience, not everyone, of course, formed on but there was a kind of a big falling out between John Hughes and Molly, because he had been in her movie, but she's doing teen movies essentially the whole time, and she wanted to move on from that, start getting the more and it as a personal slight that she was not going to in his next film, because he was very, I felt he was very genuine in his photography and in his writing, and so he wrote these characters with people in mind on who could do it. And so it kind of seemed a bit like a slight to him that she would, now that she could, do a few other things. Well, I'm too big for your movies now. And according to what I read, they were pretty much kind of not enemies for years, but they were just, didn't keep in contact and everything else. And then I think they amended towards the end when she got older, because she kind of was like, I should not have been the stereotypical actress of I'm too good for your movies now type thing.
Yeah, I mean, she had. I don't want to dump on whatever her designs and hopes were, but I mean, she did at that point in history have a golden ticket there, and yeah, she might have gotten locked in had she stayed, but unfortunately for her, she more or less got locked in anyways. I'm trying to think what she's been in besides. I think she was in an HBO version of The Stand. And
Oh no,
then,
that was a big no. The big budget one was in the early '90s. That was on ABC. Because I remember being,
that was on ABC.
yeah, that was like the scariest thing I'd ever seen on regular TV. They had the warnings and stuff, and it scared the crap out of me.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Did it hold tight? I never actually watched it, but I'd read the book. Well, we've talked about that before. Read the book, so I didn't know.
I think it held up better than the HBO adaptation for sure.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. So, and actually, I said Molly Ringwald, but man, there are so many places we could go just using John Hughes as a base, because Candy deserves. How do you even deal with that? I don't know how you look at. What's that?
What do you mean? How do you deal with, in what respects to John Candy? What do you mean?
He was this massive big deal at the time, which is odd because it's not like, again, these were not art house films. These are not going in and getting Golden Globes and getting Oscar wins and all that. These are just popcorn summer movies. And you've got this guy from Canada. He was Canadian, yeah. Pretty sure he was Canadian.
Don't you know?
So, he's coming in, and it's just he was I don't know, maybe I'm reaching here, but I would say like Candy was the visual representation of John Hughes.
I would agree with that. Yeah. I mean, and John Candy passing so suddenly, that really tore up John Hughes, because they had obviously a wonderful working relationship, and John Candy, by all accounts, was one of the greatest, nicest men, actors in the industry whatsoever. And John Hughes talked about John Candy, had he lived, he was moving into that kind of directing role. He wanted to get involved, and they had a great, professional and personal relationship. And John Candy was very, very thankful for being put into, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, The Great Outdoors, Uncle Buck, Home Alone. Even I think he did Home Alone. A little that they reached out to him, and his representative like put out a number, and John Candy found out that to his payment, what he was going to be paid, and it was too much. They couldn't get him. John Candy found out about it, heard that John Hughes was producing, writing, and had a big part of that movie, and so he didn't fire his. I don't think he fired his agent, but he said, "Oh no, I'll just do it," and he got paid, but he didn't get his normal fee, just so he could appear in a John Hughes production.
How cool is that? Look, when John calls, it's a different kind of call.
Exactly.
That's man. That and there's humanity
Bo-
there. There's
Boomer
humanity.
loyalty.
And what's that?
Boomer loyalty. Or
Yeah, so
loyalty in
that
general.
that is an interesting aspect. Yeah, and so it's funny to me too to work through some of this stuff because here recently I've been working through Rambo Van Halen's book that I'm going to mispronounce it, that American Sam Zanter,
Hollywood Sam's
but
that.
thank you. So I'm working through that, and I'm listening to him talk about Ferris Bueller and all that, and it's curious to me. I just recently watched Ferris Bueller. I don't know, within the past 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, and I don't hold it in as high esteem as he does. And that's no dig at him. I do just wonder how much of a generational identity is wrapped up in in the way Hughes approached his timeline of movies. I might be making too much of that, but I do think there's this, starting in the burbs, moving into the I can be anything, and coming back to oh, family. I mean, the whole idea. Have you ever heard that meme of Home Alone? What is it? Home Alone is a Christian movie, or Home Alone is the Christian movie, or something. Have you seen that?
No, no.
Yeah, it's just this idea that this kid is lost, and then the old guy with the shovel is sort of this person of Christ that and comes into his life. Also, the hand wounds and all that. Um, and it's silly, but at the same time, I mean, Macaulay Culkin's just there, sort of holding down the fort, waiting for his parents to come back. Um, yeah, I wonder if there's something there. I don't know, but I think that's maybe a perfect place to jump in with Oliver Stone. How familiar are you with Oliver Stone?
I mean, fairly familiar, and I was really interested in how you were going to kind of tie a bow on the optimism part in
Yeah,
in his productions. 'Cause, I didn't see a whole lot of optimism in his filmography and of the movies that I saw. I mean,
sure.
he almost seemed to be a bit of the opposite of a John Hughes, looking back at his generation. I mean, especially movies like Platoon, Wall Street, Born
Hmm.
on the Fourth, Heaven and Born Killers. I mean, that's about as nihilist as it can get. And
So
so,
I'm gonna push back a tinge on NBK being nihilistic in that I think you're right, and I think we're gonna run into. So this is one of the theses of mine that we're gonna get into when we get to Eggers and how I approach him. But when we work through Stone, I think the it's sort of the flip side of Hughes, in that um, whereas Hughes is saying we can be anything, Stone is still holding on to that. He has the idea that yes, we can be anything, but there's nothing good to be, and also this sort of, and you won't let me be anything more, or you won't let me be any better, because I still have to work within uh, your your framework. It almost just seems to me like it's sort of the same expression, because we see that in the Breakfast Club. Um, just this idea that I'm going to transcend the traditions and the expectations.
mhm.
And so you can go into any Stone movie and see that I'm going to transcend the expectations and the framework that I've been born into. And Stone was very much in the repercussions of me having transcended is this nasty Americana false patriotism. Why won't you just recognize the truth? Even though I don't think what he was presenting was an honest depiction, but I think he was he was the yin to Hughes's yang, but I think they were both still that boomer reaction to where they had come from. Do you think that's fair, or you think that's a little bit
No, I think that's
off?
fair in the way that you could see John Hughes movies would show the bleachers with people and everyone's happy and they're rooting for the home team. And Oliver Stone would show a part of that and the camera to behind the bleachers with all the trash on the ground and just the refuse
Yes.
and the coming to the game that's standing outside the fence just listening to the game. Like he's going,
Yep.
yeah, this was a part of it, but this was also a part of it. You can see that in Platoon. It starts out and you have that very,
Yeah.
I think Charlie Sheen was the optimistic guy getting to Vietnam and trying to do everything right. And, you know, he had allies there and Willem Dafoe. But then Tom Berenger, of course, was playing the antagonist and
Yep.
just kind of showing the both sides of the coin a bit. Is that kind of what you're getting at with the Oliver Stone movies?
Oh, forgive me. Am I sorry. I thought I had muted myself. Yeah, that's more or less it, because there's something going on there. It's I don't want to make it too simple and be like, "Oh, he was just a hippie." But it was sort of that idea of, you're showing me all this good stuff. Let me show you what's really going on, and how you guys have messed everything up, and how we're going to take it and do better from here.
No, that's fair. That is very fair. Like, it definitely was not every movie was some sort of iteration of here's what the hippies thought about everything. No, not at all. I mean, even Born on the 4th of July with, you know, he's not tears, he's going, does his due. And at least to me, he comes back a bit Panda, but he quite for himself at first at all, but the reactions to everyone else, like their lives went on, it was not some big
Yes.
cataclysm to them, and he is stuck where he is at with being paralyzed, and he's dealing with all that contains of that in life, and dealing with the hospitals and just the indifference there. But it's still on an movie, and you know, I was very young when it came out, but I still can slightly recall there was a bit on why'd you make this anti-American movie, and he's like, it's not anti-American. This guy loved his country. This guy served. He volunteered. He went over there, and this was his experiences coming back, because it was based on a real guy that
Right.
happened. And he goes, I'm just showing, like I said earlier, I'm not only showing the features, I'm showing underneath the features. I'm showing behind there. Like, this is life as well.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and and he digs into that a little bit too when you jump into Natural Born Killers, because it's this idea of, these guys they're only able to operate in this manner because you want to see it. You want to know that um, there is death, and there is rebellion, and there is a reality that goes beyond the white picket fence. And of course there's a SA involved, and there's and I think that's no, I think your whole idea of trash under the bleachers is probably a great way of framing almost all of his films.
It was very, a lot of it on one hand was just totally but
Yeah.
what you're pointing out right there, and I believe Oliver Stone even did an interview where he pointed out exactly that what is it, not Robert De Niro, Robert Downey Jr.
Dangerfield. Oh, okay.
Rodney,
Yeah.
well, he was in,
Downey.
yeah, but no, Robert
Yeah,
Downey
yeah,
Jr.
yeah.
was playing the
Yeah.
reporter. Didn't he have a show? And he was trying to get, Mickey and
Mhm.
Mallory get that interview. And there's scenes where they're showing cheering crowds wearing Mickey and Mallory T-shirts and cheering it on. And Oliver Stone pointed out, he goes, I'm just showing a mirror to the American public, because when that came out in 1994, we'd had a string of high profile serial killers, Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer, and the whole list, and how they became stars. They became, something. And he was even hearkening back to the man, the women would come in there and look at Charlie and stuff. And he's like, crazy how you make these people celebrities. You want the gore, you want to see this. And that was just his extreme, interpretation of it, of that zeitgeist.
It was very much, and so this sort of starts digging into as well, were these directors caught up in something that was beyond them? And so what they were putting on film was simply what they would naturally express, or were they actually sitting there and creating generational ideas? Do you see the?
I mean, product of their times, and I could see how, especially with Oliver Stone looking around underneath the bleachers of Americana and seeing kind of like, well, wait, this is never really shown. I mean, a great example of that is Any Given Sunday. Came out in 1999, the football movie, and it shows he does the yin and yang of the interviews, but then, well, back there in the locker room, they're shooting Toradol straight into Dennis Quaid's knees. So and just kind of showing the rhyme of reality there as well.
Yeah. Hey, so Abbott threw something in here that I want to acknowledge before, frankly, before the chat moves on past it. But which generation is Spielberg considered boomers? He might be before boomers. Definitely, his most famous works came out during the boomer generation. I will say, without being too explicit, there is a particular narrative that Spielberg is involved in that, frankly, I think affected more of his work, or affected his work in more of a way than just his generation did. And we'll leave it at that unless you have anything to add to that, Arthur.
Within the realm of the 70s in that time, but he really hit right throughout, and it was movies part optimistic. Heck, remember when he CGI'd out the guns in the G-men and put walkie-talkies in there? There's a big uproar about changing around the movies and stuff. Like, oh, don't put children in danger. It's like, well, it was a Spielberg movie. I mean, Spielberg movie, a kid actually gets unalived, unless you count AI, which, I mean, he just got turned.
That would be. I'm not sure I could do that one justice, but that would certainly be a curious stream, is to do one on Spielberg.
Oh, I mean, so looking at his filmography and his themes, and it'd be out there a bit. We'll just leave it at that. Great question.
I don't know if I want to do that one, but
right.
Yeah. Well, so Abbott actually, he has another question in here, which we'll address real quick. He says, how much of the rebellion stuff, which seems to be an intergenerational theme, is based on that deep American desire to be contrary and deep down to be a rebel against the world as it stands? I think that's a good question, but so there's sort of two things that are going on right now in this generation of baby boomer creators. And so the one is that, yes, you have that sort of American idea, but then you also have their existence as baby boomers, where their parents were more hands off. But it's also that, a lot of times when parents are more hands off and the child becomes more independent, there is sort of this corrective where, eventually they have to learn to take guidance from and wisdom from those that came before them. And so this is sort of getting into generational cyclical theory. And so normally that would happen because eventually, the way things have always been, you're going to start hitting a brick wall on economics and on building that require the knowledge of the previous generation. What happened with the boomers is that the post World War II, there was such a global base and an economic thrust and just this idea of throwing money at things. There was this economic boom that was completely unheard of in previous cycles of generations. And so they didn't have that natural corrective there. And so if we go back, we can think of movies like what's the one with James Dean? It's his most famous one.
Rebel Without a Cause.
Yes. Okay. So you've got that. You've got Cool Hand Luke. You've got these ideas of, well, watch me put my foot in my mouth again, but I want to say Cool Hand Luke was late 60s. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it was after The Hustler, so it was late 60s or so. Yeah, with
Okay.
Paul Newman.
Yes. Yep. And so there is this strand of Americanism that says, yes, we're going to cut our own path. But I don't think it was to the degree of we're going to cut our own path and here's how you all did it wrong. That was sort of the so on the front end, the boomers were able to jump into the we're going to do it our way. But then again, through globalism, technological advances in the economic front, they were able to keep up that momentum. There was no corrective to where they were headed and the ideas they were coming up with. And so because there was no corrective, they were also able to look back, even in their movies, like we've been talking about, and say, and this is how you guys have done it all wrong. And this is how we're going to pick up the torch, carry it on, and do better than anybody else ever has. And only now in quite a late stage in their life, are you seeing some of them be like, oh dear, how do we get here? What happened? So yeah.
I was just going to ask your opinion. Would it also be realistic to say that these movies we're talking about in the 1960s, Cool Hand Luke came out in 67, and then you moved into the 70s where there was a lot more gritty movies coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think we still had more of a connected culture or monolith culture where this was kind of the only avenue to put out the opposing ideas, whatnot? Like it was kind of stifled a bit. So you had these directors and coming out with their visions.
So one that's an interesting thought, just straight up an interesting thought. But then two, if we were to go back in time, especially in the tea houses and in churches on Sunday morning, film wasn't nearly as acceptable a use of time as it is nowadays. Nowadays there's Christian studios and all that. No, so I do think that's actually a really curious point you brought up, and I think we've talked about this before. Like Dagum, It's a Wonderful Life. We look at it now as like just straight up right wing propaganda, when at the time Capra's getting put up there and being like, "Why are you making communist movies? Why are you trying to make what's his name, Mr. Potter, the bad guy, when he's just trying to hold the fort down?" Ugh, that Ben Shapiro rant. Ugh.
Yeah, I missed that stream, but I listened to it. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, exactly. I'm even just thinking about Ben Shapiro arguing like Mr. Potter was a good guy. Whatever.
You should never retire. Listen to me. Never retire.
And
we're gonna go on a tangent, bro.
Okay. I was
exactly.
And he sits here and he tells us that Americans go and they climb mountains and they strive and they conquer frontiers. So the last thing I will say is, Mr. Shapiro, go play your violin. Enjoy whatever fantasies you've created for yourself.
And
We'll
watch
take
the
it from
Americans
here.
on TV climb the mountains and do things.
That guy. All right.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably a pretty fair wrap up on the boomer cinema identity. You think that's pretty good?
I think we put a good pin in it for now. Especially,
Yeah.
I'm excited to. I'm curious to see when you're going to talk.
I'm
about
excited.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm excited. I know a little bit of inside baseball, folks, and I know Arthur's got one for me. So let's jump in here with Judd Apatow. Yeah. Okay. So this is they've got his biggest ones here. What they're not showing now, see, was it his brainchild or? All right, Arthur, go ahead and jump in. Give us your initial assessment of Apatow because I want to double check something.
I mean, really, from Judd Apatow movies, I really became aware of them. I would say, well, in the early 2000s, 40-Year-Old Virgin came out, but it was really just hit and miss for me. Like, he didn't direct Talladega Nights, Ballad of Ricky Bobby, but he was a producer on it. Saw that one, but I was kind of dreading you bringing him up because he's never really been not my kind of director. I mean, I haven't watched This Is 40 or Trainwreck or I didn't even see Knocked Up. I think I saw 2 of his movies, and one of them he didn't even direct, but he wrote. So, but you did bring up Freaks and Geeks, and a little side note before we started recording, I was talking offline that came out. Freaks and Geeks came out in what year? That was 1999, I believe. I'm looking it up right now. Hold on a second. Freaks and Geeks. Yes, 1999. And for full disclosure on the show, I was in the military overseas, and you don't always get everything you get to watch when you're in the States. So that television series was not available where I was at. So I never saw Freaks and Geeks. I've seen a couple of documentaries. He kind of had his acting crew that came out of that he put into more and more movies. Seth Rogen, James Franco, and whatnot. But I know that Panda had a few thoughts on it because from what you were telling me, you had watched that quite a bit. I think you're on mute, Panda.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So, but before we
Professional
jump into
streaming here.
Yeah, right. I'm not monetized yet. We're good. But no. So before we jump into Apatow and especially his films and what he's putting out, in my mind, Freaks and Geeks is great. It really it is great as a window into time, which I have no familiarity with, which is the 70s, the late 70s, early 80s. And so there is this thing where I'm trusting his perception and the things he's presenting. The same thing we do with the Wonder Years or whatever.
Well, real quick, Panda.
Yeah.
Pretend I'm in the audience. I've never heard of Freaks and Geeks. Where was it set? What was the background of it? You just said it was
High
set
school.
in the late 70s?
It was high school in the late 70s.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember. So that's actually an interesting one. Give me just a second. I want to double check where it was set geography wise, because I think that might have an interesting interplay with Hughes. Because another thing we didn't talk about, at least explicitly, do you know where Oliver Stone is from originally?
Isn't it Ohio?
Is
or do you not know either?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I can't remember where he's from. And so I do wonder how much of that played into it. Okay, so Freaks and Geeks is set in Michigan. So we're coming back to the Midwest, which I think is curious. Now that's not where because many of his movies are set in California and New York and different places. But Freaks and Geeks was set in Michigan. And then just while I'm here, let me even look. Where's Oliver Stone from?
Oh, real
Or
quick,
actually, let's do. Yeah.
Here, Oliver Stone, born in New York City, and went to Yale briefly, Yale University. But in 1967, he enlisted in the Army. He wasn't drafted, and he actually served in the 25th Infantry and 1st Cavalry Division, and was wounded in action twice. Got a Bronze Star with a V for valor. Wow,
that puts an interesting spin on him.
Yeah, I've forgotten about that.
I don't know if that would have really impacted anything I'd said earlier, but it does give more light to his reaction and to the things that he was digging in on in his films. Because it
crystallizes what I was saying earlier about his, Born on the 4th of July, and the response he got to it, and he was like, "What are you talking about? I served in that war too. You think I made some big anti-American movie?" It's like, no.
Right. Jarhead gained notoriety roughly around the same time that I went in, and so there was a lot of talks within the brass of what is this? This will never be on the MCRL, the Marine Corps reading list. This is just garbage, whatever. And if you read the book, just like was presented in Generation Kill, just like you find in an Oliver Stone movie, whatever, it's not anti-American forces. But I do think, and maybe this is why it makes brass uncomfortable, maybe it's why it makes politicians uncomfortable sometimes. I do think that the U.S. military is very good, or excuse me, veterans of the U.S. military are very good at looking back and saying, what were we doing? What was being accomplished? And why, oh Senator, were you sending American boys to go and die?
Well, yeah, because if it's not a John Wayne version of events, then the military in itself is not going to be interested in it.
Yeah,
quite a few movies that initially had U.S. DoD support, and then they read the script, they're going, "You can't stuff. We're not going to be in this."
Well, and there is. I mean, you could go too far. Do you remember that movie Stop Loss? It was an MTV movie.
I saw the preview and I was going, okay, this is just way over the top, kind of.
Yeah, I was going to say there was that. There was it Brothers or there was something with Jake Gyllenhaal and I think it was Tobey Maguire, and he's coming back with PTSD. And so there are these movies that are just over the top. These over the top representations of I don't know, the mental expenditures and the weakness, or maybe not the weakness, but the fragility of soldiers, and why are we even engaging in this? And that's not what I'm trying to argue for. And in fairness to Stone, I don't even think that's what he does in his movies.
No, I agree.
But there is this, there is this question of why we signed up. We're ready to go. That's not what's in question here. The question is, you've been given this great power. Why are you wielding it so immaturely?
Well, yeah, not to get too political, but that's why one of my favorite monikers for the GOP is grifting off patriotism, because we saw plenty of that back in the early aughts. Do this or the terrorists win. And there was slipped into it, but a whole lot of filler put in as well. And you're going, wait a minute, there's a bunch of yeah, I want to defend my country, but I didn't know we were going to invade the world, then invite the entire world back to the house for a barbecue forever.
Yes.
How does it go? So yeah, definitely. And the Stop Loss movie, it was a horror movie. It's Gordon essentially. Well, that Stop Loss to me was, this like fragility, emotional.
Yes.
Okay, comes back and
Yep.
can't. No disrespect to people who can't stand firecrackers now, but I'm just everybody gets that point.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It became so I love that the grifting off patriotism. That's one side of it, and then using the effects of combat as a cudgel to try and beat the right into submission. That's what the left was doing, and the soldiers, airmen, sailors, and Marines are all standing there, being like, guys, like neither of you have this right. Calm down. Curious.
Yeah.
All right.
And
Yeah.
neither of you have our best interests in mind. You're using this politically.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, moving on. You were talking about Judd Apatow.
So yeah, Freaks and Geeks. It's set in Michigan. I do think that gives it a curious spin. And frankly, the show is somewhat reined in. Actually, it's very reined in. Part of that, I'm sure, was being on network television. I also think another part of the show being reined in was the fact that it was high school. And then the last part of that was, I might be crazy on this one, but the fact that it was set in Michigan, I think probably reined it in as well. From my mind, with the guys I know, it's flyover country, right? There are still these experiences that guys in flyover country, guys and gals, because frankly, I want to make sure that on this one I'm hitting both of them. There's still these experiences that they go through in regards to sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but it is at the same time it's met with a okay, and you're still expected to be here for Sunday dinner. And there are still not only is there a landing place for you when you're in these situations, but there's also an expectation of responsibilities that life continues on. And whether that's you working at the car wash or whether that is you helping on the farm or whatever, there are still these expectations of you. And so when we talk about flyover country being involved in sex, drugs, and rock and roll, it's not the reckless abandonment. It's not the identity of being involved in these particular areas that you see on the coast. But in fairness to the people on the coast, especially at this time in media, in representations of the coastal folks. I don't think it would have flown to represent a high school in the 70s in Michigan the same way you would have necessarily represented a high school from California or Manhattan or wherever.
Now, in that television series, did he kind of delve into that structure you saw within the Gen X directors of why does it matter within that series?
And which one
specifically? In Freaks and Geeks?
In Freaks and Geeks? Yes. Okay, yeah. So I never finished my original thought on this when we first started talking about it. So for me, Freaks and Geeks is great. And I'm also, for me, Freaks and Geeks is the high watermark of Apatow. He has all of the teenagers asking the question of, we can be anything, but why? Where's the there? They're already asking this question of, who are we? What is our identity? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? And the frustrating part for me when you jump into Apatow is he writes the same film with a different skin over and over and over again. And it always comes back to this question of, why? Why didn't you teach me this? What is it I'm supposed to be accomplishing? how are things supposed to go after high school? Which is the perfect question and the perfect setup for a group of high schoolers. But in the 40-year-old virgin, and he got this pass in some ways of, oh, he makes films with a lot of heart. Well, I guess you could say that, but I think you could also make the argument that his characters were just stunted. They never got past the high school age. And so what we saw as a lot of heart and conscientiousness on their part, like Seth Rogen calling his dad after he's gotten this girl pregnant and saying, "Oh man, Dad, what am I doing?" This is a high school question. But this is a grown man that's calling him, asking him this high school question because there was never any growth on the character's part. And maybe that was the meta of the Apatow films. I mean, maybe he is some dark genius who saw all of this and just wanted to keep hammering us over the head with it. But does that sort of make sense what I'm saying? Why, for me, again, I think he peaked in Freaks and Geeks because I also don't know that he ever got beyond Freaks and Geeks, even when he's using 40-year-old characters.
Yeah, and it's interesting to look at the actors that went on to be in a number of his films. Seth Rogen, of course, pretty much being in almost every one, but Jonah Hill and whatnot. And I think you capture that in the movies that I've seen. The characters just kind of wander around. There's a little bit of a finality to it, maybe a storyline tied together, but others are just kind of just there. And especially saw this in Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Did you notice that in that film as well?
Well, so that is one of them that I have not seen. Is that one Apatow, or is that what's that?
It's interesting. It's Apatow with what's his name, Jason Weigel, where he goes to Hawaii to get over what's her name. She's been in everything. Crap.
Oh,
he goes to Hawaii to forget about her, but she's next door with the new boyfriend and everything.
Oh, no, maybe I did see that, but that's been years.
Yeah, it just seems like some of his movies, they end and it's like, it's time to end this. And yeah. Back in the day when you actually went to a movie theater to watch something, it's okay. Well, I hope the popcorn wasn't too dry. And you would watch it and just kind of be like, well, what mattered in that movie? Nothing stuck from his movies. I mean, even the 40-year-old virgin, okay, he's now in his new little family there, and okay, it was funny, but not memorable.
And there was this focus on true love and sexes and everything. It's like, yeah, cool. Is this what we need?
He's 40 in this movie, like still playing with his little action figures and stuff. I mean, no offense if you like that, but still, is realistic? No, not really. But for me to throw the
so
director curveball at you.
Go for it, please. I'm excited.
Mad at me. Mike.
This is good. Oh, okay. So yeah, let me pull the list up for everybody.
Mike, see that. Yeah,
let's see.
I can see that through.
Oh, this was a good one. Well played. Okay. Oh, this is good. All right, Arthur, make your case. Uh-oh. Are you on mute, bud? Uh-oh. I wonder if we're losing Arthur. Let's see. Can everybody else hear me? On my end, it looks like we're good on volume levels. Hey, Arthur, I'm going to cut you and bring you back in. Give me just a second. Interesting. Okay, so I think we might be losing Arthur on his end. So let's hope that he jumps back in. I don't know if Wit or anybody wants to contact him on X. That would be helpful, just so you can see that things aren't quite working on this end. All right. So I'm curious what he's going to say about Judge. I'm excited to see where he goes with that. I actually think that was a great call. So when I did these, again, I've already explained it at the beginning. For the most part, I was looking for mass market appeal, something that people knew about, that was ubiquitous. Certainly with Judge, you've got Beavis and Butthead. I think there's no doubt that you have to take that into acknowledgement. And then King of the Hill. If you went with Judge, I think you would have to do um, man, actually, it's harder than I would think. I was going to say, I think the big three would be Beavis and Butthead, Office Space, and King of the Hill. But I might be wrong about that. It might actually be Office Space, Idiocracy, and I don't know. Choosing between King of the Hill and Beavis and Butthead is really difficult. I think King of the Hill has more of a lasting presence, but I do have to wonder if Beavis and Butthead was a greater impact, at least initially. Arthur, do we have you back on? Oh man, I thought we had him. Bummer. Yeah, so that would be my thoughts. Is maybe that. Because the hard thing with Idiocracy is it is, everybody at this point knows Brando. Everybody makes, especially in a political sense, they recognize the argument, they're able to frame the argument, and they're able to say that there are issues and we're getting dumber. And this is before you even get into Ed Dutton and dropping IQ and the actual literal scientific issues. We can feel it and see it. What is the word that is commonly used now? I think it's the enshittification of streaming, of our daily lives, of things not operating in efficient's the wrong word, but they're not operating in what is a good way for us, but they're operating in a way that makes the shareholders the most money, that ensures the most ad revenue, and forfeits any higher purpose. And that enables the consumer to be more stupid to some degree as well. And frankly, to some degree, forces the consumer to be more stupid, because they have to continue to put up with the nonsense that is the way they're handling these issues, they being the powers that be. All right, let's see if we got Arthur. Arthur, you hear me? I see you.
I hear you.
I get. Fair enough. All right.
Okay. Sorry about.
No, you're good. You're good. Hey, so I went through, and amongst other things, I was trying to. What's that? Oh no, Arthur, you there, man? Uh-oh.
I can hear you.
Okay. All right. So I went through it, and I sort of picked out my big three. Initially, I was thinking it was going to be Beavis and Butthead, Office Space, and King of the Hill. But now I'm going back and I'm thinking the big three would be Office Space, Idiocracy, and I am having a time going between King of the Hill and Beavis and Butthead. Or do you think I'm totally off? If you could say this is Mike Judge's legacy and impact, what are his big three, you think?
Those are my
Yeah.
top three.
Well, because I'm thinking, I almost feel like King of the Hill was bigger than Beavis and Butthead, but I think Beavis and Butthead, frankly, might have had more of an impact. Oh no! What the world? All right, let's see. Arthur, you there?
Yes.
Okay. Huh, huh. All right.
Oh,
So yeah, go ahead and jump in. Make your case for Judge and what I think this was a great pick. Tell me how he represents Gen X cinema and what it is that he's capturing or influencing.
good to connect now if you can hear it. It definitely represents to me, Beavis and Butthead. Funny show, but it really encapsulates the why does it matter? Their adventures, they never learn anything. They go to the same house, they watch, you going down to the store and getting another Slurpee and playing with fire and whatnot.
Yeah. There is this almost doggone it. Well, unfortunately, I'm not sure what's going on with Arthur's connection. But yeah, I think as odd as this might sound, I wonder if Beavis and Butthead are sort of a more legitimate presentation of sort of the spirit of Pauly Shore. It sounds kind of absurd what I'm saying, but Pauly Shore jumps in and he has, let's see. All right. Arthur, how we doing? Oh man. All right, no worries. I think we might end up having to call it for Arthur on this. Let's see. Give me just a moment, guys. I wish I had like some what you call it, intermission music. I have no jingles, so just go have fun. I'm going to be muted for just a moment. All right. My apologies for all that, guys. Hey, I appreciate the patience for those who are here with us live. And then if you happen to go ahead and just jump through and fast forward. I appreciate that. So anyway, unfortunately, we did lose Arthur, but we brought in the Kaiser. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. I actually just got done with Pony Express Radio. I just got done with a show with them. I had Sam Batch and Charles Main on. Had a give me 1 second because I have your show playing in the background. There we go. But
I was like, hey, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, so I had just seen that one of my other favorite podcasters, WanderMrPanda, was going over some very interesting topics. And Arthur is a great guy, but it is very sad that the Rothschilds are, DDoSing him as we speak to ruin it. And I thought it might be worthwhile to see if we could keep the show going on, because you were hitting on I'd seen your post that you made on this particular topic. And I thought it was very interesting, just the idea that the boomer movies are about how you can just do anything, how do you follow your dreams, how and then what was it, Gen X's why does that even matter, which I think is a very correct assessment, because around then is where you do get all of these very nihilistic films that do come out. And the millennial movies really are just kind of nothing in a lot of ways.
So it'll be fun. It'll be fun to jump into Ager's, because as I'm building these things, I worry that, it was all confirmation bias as I built my list, but I really was trying to figure out who were these directors that are representing these various generations. I think Arthur had a nice argument going. I'm hoping one day we could get through that with Mike Judge. I think that was actually, did not think of him at all.
As that and his argument was for what, millennials or for Gen X? Like, it doesn't matter.
For Gen X.
Yes, I'd say that fits very well. That not like it doesn't even matter, especially with some of these. I would say Office. It's interesting because in a lot of ways, Mike Judge, I do actually think, does show that there are things that matter, particularly in Office Space, where especially with the end. I mean, like he's essentially saying with a lot of this that a lot of the things that we do in modern society don't matter. I mean, that's the driving force of Office Space, right? Where the film is all about how, even though he's working the typical job that you would kind of idealize, and he has a home and he has all of these things and this status, but the work is just so soul crushing that he finds his happiness as a construction worker.
Here's an odd question for you. Have you seen the King of the Hill reboot?
No, I didn't bother.
So I will say
King of the Hill, just not the reboot.
The reboot shocked me.
How so?
I'm not going to say it was great, but it was worth my time.
Okay.
It was absolutely worth my time. As a matter of fact, let me double check here. I'm pretty sure I have a reboot. I'm pretty sure we did a stream or two on the reboot and went through it and covered that. Let's see. So if you guys dig way back, matter of fact, 8 months ago, and this is fun. This is with Otto, and Arthur was on that one as well. We did a 2-hour review of the King of the Hill, whatchamacallit, reboot.
The soft sequel reboot thing, which is what people tend to like to do now, because reboots are so hashed out that we need to redo how we do reboots.
So it was better than it had any right to be. Definitely had some fumbles. Is not, I mean, I was going to say it wasn't season 3, 4, and 5, but what is? Even by the time King of the Hill ended, it was not at its height.
No, but it had definitely lacked, particularly towards the end of it. I completely agree with that.
Yep. So, however, the reason I bring it up is because, sort of like when we were talking about Hughes versus Stone, I think there is. So both of them are addressing the issue in boomer culture, and Hughes is still tying it back and saying, but yeah, this stuff is good. It's something worth remembering. It's something worth participating in. And then here in Gen X, frankly, I believe Judge more than I believe Apatow. I believe one, that they're both recognizing the issue of why does it matter? Where do we go from here? How do we continue? But Apatow gets stuck there. And he shows the effects of what it means to be that we're stuck there.
You are
Whereas,
heavily elevating what ends up as a lot of comedy with Apatow as lol weed funny.
so
I'm not
have you
saying you're
seen?
wrong. I love the
Yeah,
pun, the take of it. But I'm saying that like it's funny because most people just take it as like haha we joke, or like I mean like 40-year-old virgin and some of these other things. It is interesting to see that like even these things do act like, because everything does have more that it's speaking to and comes across. That's what I find. That's what I'm getting
gotcha.
at. Is that like a lot of
Yeah,
people will write it off as like pretty meaningless, dumb comedy,
yeah,
especially
and
all the
I
Seth
don't
Rogen
think
stuff.
oh man. Well, so what I have you seen Freaks and Geeks?
I have actually. I rather liked it
Okay.
when I was growing up and watching that.
Yeah, so the
I mean,
argument I made
I didn't
with
watch it when it aired. I'm a younger person, but I've
right.
always liked older shows and older things, and so
Yeah.
that was older to me, and I enjoyed it when I was watching it. I haven't seen it in a long time, but
What I told Arthur is that I thought Freaks and Geeks was great. The issue with Judd Apatow is that he rightly diagnosed the issues and he never moved on from Freaks and Geeks. What happened is that literally the actors that he was using, but then also creatively the characters he was using, and we'll count Superbad as sort of this outlier within his films. But by and large, in his films, he's moving on to these 40-year-olds, these in their 30s, and they're still dealing with the same questions that they were dealing with in high school. And so it's either that Judd Apatow can only make one film and use a different can of paint on everyone, or it's that he's this evil genius that continues to say, this is the issue, what are we going to do about it? This is the issue, what are we going to do about it? And I don't know that I trust that it's the second one. So that's where I was going with the distinctions between him and Mike Judge. I just think Mike Judge is probably more sincere in the way he recognizes these are the issues and says that not only is there a problem, but that these problems are worth figuring out and there is something worth fighting for.
no, I completely agree, and I think throughout all of his works, he does definitely have actual solutions. Besides, I think Beavis and Butthead. I think I don't see as much with that one,
Right.
but with virtually
It's
everything, there are morals to it. There's ways to figure things out. I mean, like
yeah.
Idiocracy, which like when I was growing up, like every teacher I had was like, "This is what we're going towards under like the Bush era." Like even like in like
Yeah.
middle school and elementary school, I remember them talking about Idiocracy and how much that meant to them in what they saw in that. It's fascinating too, especially just how there is like hope in all of these things that he makes, where he's like he does actually provide what he sees as the solutions. Like with Idiocracy, it's simply to like, oh, if you just get educated, if you just care about these things, if you just put in the time, you'll get something out of it. With Office Space, it's more so do something that has like an actual tangible effect on the world, and then that's what will bring you more happiness than pure seeking materialism and working in these office jobs. That's more or less
Yes.
what you see out of these things. But yeah, I agree. No, Judd Apatow, there's really not much of a solution that's ever given.
Right.
And what you hit on particularly with the high school thing, I think Bowling for Soup had greater diagnosis of like our dynamics and our culture with the song High School Never Ends than most political philosophers, particularly at the time. I think that it speaks to that, where it's like the thing, like you just do not move on. And I think like boomers would talk about like, millennials never grew up, they never did any of this. And that's one of the things I think they have some degree of truth to that, particularly when you're looking at like millennial culture and why they're so fascinated with reboots and all these things, why those are the
Mhm.
films that make with them. It's just retreading the same ground over and over. It's kind of a self-fulfilling loop with that, where or their love of bringing back things from their childhood and then recreating it and trying to have that just stay around. I think that is very much like something that happened with the millennials. I mean, I think you could see it throughout all of it. Like, they grew up with, Star Wars, and what is it? And we're going to go do Star Wars forever. Grew up with all
Well,
these.
and their parents,
Yeah.
when we start diagnosing the through lines and stuff, their parents were of the mind, this is how my parents raised me. We're not doing that in this house. We're going to do it better. And so I think for many millennials, there was this moment in time. There was this moment in time when they were still children under their parents' care, where their parents were invested in them and they were going into Little League and they were going to Boy Scouts, and there was stuff in their life that they can look back and say, oh man, that was great. Well, what happens, because if we go way back in the stream, we're talking about how, the boomers didn't have that hands-on parenting. But this is, at least to some degree, maybe not in all the minutia, but I definitely buy into generational cycles. And what's unique about the boomers is that normally when you don't have that hands-on parenting initially, you do get that independence, but eventually the independence gets smacked out of you because you do ultimately have to see how the generations prior to you made things work. There was such, in the post-war period with the boomers, there was such economic opportunity and globalism. And if you were willing to dispossess yourself of your heritage and of your foundation, you were able to go out and make it. And that was an oddity in history that they don't recognize, and they didn't receive that corrective function of having to go back. And so now when millennials are coming up, millennials are longing for the time when, their parents were totally invested in them, and their parents, the boomers, are like, yeah, but now you fly the coop and you make things happen and bada bing. It's like, well, that's not not to make this whole thing just about beating up on the baby boomers, but this is a
No,
reality
nobody
that
craps on the baby boomers enough. That's not a tread on talking point enough about how awful the baby boomers are. Definitely no
right.
one's. Yeah.
No original
Like,
thoughts
it makes me
here.
want to defend the baby boomers, because there are like things that are not horrific about them, as much as you can say that there's a lot like that. They do have some positive qualities that I think more people,
Right.
will no one speak for the boomer.
Well, and I think that I do think that there was a corrective to at least how they felt they were raised. Um, the lack of involvement by their parents, or the lack of care or acknowledgement of what was going on as they were growing up. And so when their kids were kids, they were trying to address that. But then it's not the 80s anymore. And that's hard for them to grasp at times.
They cannot. Yeah, that's the biggest thing, is like they cannot grasp that time has moved on.
You can't just as a white guy walk up, have a good handshake, and get onto Wall Street anymore. That's not how it goes.
Now, however, if you're interacting with boomers, and this is what I try to tell people, particularly in these situations, if you learn how to speak boomer and present yourself as like a clean cut, like young white guy who's like, I just want to do this, like they will actually like be extremely receptive to that, because it like brings them back to like what they would like to see. The problem is like if you're doing anything in terms of like trying to get something financial out of them, they still think in 1960s dollars in terms of what they're going to contribute, and they expect you to do a lot of work for literally nothing, because it's like, I worked for nothing and I did this, and this, and so they'll expect you to do the same.
Well, I had one guy, he was talking about, what was he doing? So he's now a boomer, and he was talking about how hard his parents worked. that they both only brought in $22,000 a year. I was thinking 44,000, and this was like $1971, and I was like, holy crap! So,
Yeah,
matter
you're
of fact, let me
talking
just
triple figure income.
yes,
Easy in
so let
terms
me
of
just pull that up while I'm here.
Yeah. No, that because they don't understand that like these things have changed.
Inflation is a thing.
Yes.
So $42,000 from 1971 becomes $348,000.
So you're in the equivalent to the top income bracket of the taxes for the United
No
States.
kidding. No kidding. It's just
yeah. When you really like, and the craziest thing, like, I know that I said I want to defend boomers, but like the craziest thing is like they'll try and say, well, like they'll talk about, well, my I got my home at a mortgage rate of like 17% APR when I got it, and it's like, well, yes, but you also refinanced like 6 years later when they went down, and your relative price for your home, you could work as like a mechanic and be able to afford it, no problem.
And that's the thing, is it's the issue. Really, if we went down to one single issue, it would probably be the lack of wage growth in comparison to everything else. But yeah. Anyways, so we had the boomer, I can be anything, and then we jumped into Gen X, and it's the but why and how. Now this is the part of the stream where I make everybody in our circles very frustrated. Well, first, can you think of any millennial directors besides Eggers? Anybody that sticks out in your mind?
It's funny. I just talked about this on PER, but I think Sam Levinson actually does, the director of Euphoria. If you would consider him a millennial, and what
I don't know, is he
communicating?
I actually haven't.
I hope to God Euphoria. He's not a Zoomer, and I have to own that. I mean, he's millennial aged, I'm certain.
Okay.
Yeah, he's 41.
No, yeah, so he's millennial. Interesting. Yeah, so I'm not familiar with his work. What has he done besides Euphoria?
Well, this is what I was talking about on the other stream, but he did a movie called Assassination Nation that stuck with me when it was running as YouTube ads. I think I was still in my teens when this came on, but it like stuck. But it was a movie that came out just after Trump that he wrote because of him. And the trailer was like scenes of the movie and then flashing on the screen like homophobia, sexism, racism, misogyny, and all of these things. And the whole, like the movie takes place, and this is a completely unpopular movie that didn't hit the culture at all the same way Euphoria does, but it shows his mindset and what he was trying to make and do. And the movie takes place in Salem, like the Salem witch trials, and it's all about this conservative white town of like your normal like average Republican voter, and how they're all actually like evil people, and they are going to like, they all have these dark secrets to them, and they're all actually secretly gay or secretly having affairs or this, that, and the other. And then
so it's like a 21st century American not American History X.
That's a very different movie.
American Beauty.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, American Beauty has more to it. This was extremely on the nose. Wow. What? No, I mean, like American Beauty is a subtle work of art compared to this particular. I mean, he was also trying to shoehorn in male to female transgenders through it. Like everything he makes, he includes one.
I was going to say, I must not know what Euphoria was. I thought that was the Amazon Prime show that was all about the old transgendered guy or something.
No, you're thinking, I know the one that you're talking about, but no, it's a different one. Euphoria is the one with Zendaya and Sydney Sweeney.
I mean, I guess I know who they are, sort of.
Essentially, it's really similar. It's interesting to look at it in comparison to like a Freaks and Geeks,
Yeah.
because it is also about high schoolers, but it is a much, much darker high school
Yeah.
where everyone's on drugs. Everyone is just these wild hedonists or drug addicts or depressed or like wants to die, like in a way that is far beyond where like Freaks and Geeks has some elements of these things where, they
Yes.
smoke weed and they do different things.
Yep.
And what was did you watch the college version of Freaks and Geeks that he made? I'm blanking on the name of it. But he had made a similar show to Freaks and Geeks, but it was about kids in college. Let me find
Let's
that.
see. So it was a show?
Yes.
Undeclared?
Yes, Undeclared.
No, I have not seen that.
Yeah, if you did like Freaks and Geeks, you'd probably like that one as well. But it's very similar,
Okay.
and it does hit the
Yes.
same thing where it's just like you never actually move on from high school. You're always doing the exact same things you did before.
Yes.
And then the movies he makes when he moves on to older people, it is just that same thing. Whereas Euphoria is like that, but ramped up to a whole other level where everyone is just like miserable and depressed and chasing all these random highs and doing this, that, and the other that is just utterly degenerate.
Where is Euphoria set?
I forget what town. I've literally never watched an episode of it, and nor do I ever plan to. But I'm fascinated just because that juxtaposition of those two things that he made, that movie that literally no one remembers except for me, because I saw a YouTube ad about it, and what he made in Euphoria, which now like even like Dugan is talking about Euphoria, so it's clearly penetrated.
I can't keep up with Dugan.
I refuse to anymore.
I've got better uses of my time.
So yeah, I don't need to argue about why Indians are not actually the true Aryans or whatever he's rolling off of.
Well, I was going to say something that I meant as gracious, but it wasn't very gracious. So yeah, God bless Dugan. Anyways, one of the things I had said to Arthur is Freaks and Geeks is set in Michigan. Now, let's grant the fact that it came out on network television, so that was already something that pulled it back. The content they were able to get away with. 2, it happened in high school. Up until a decade ago, that limited some of the content that they were able to get into. And 3, it came out 99, and so again, there was still more of a cap on what they could get a hold of. But I was telling Arthur that I think another part of it is they said it in Michigan, is so the whole idea of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. You still have that in the Midwest and in the non-coastal South, and there's a reason I'm
to cut in real quick. Euphoria is set in California.
Okay, so that's interesting. It fits into my thesis in that, or thesis, in that when at least to accurately represent flyover country, sex, drugs, and rock and roll cannot be the identity and the existence of a person. Certainly not a high schooler. You still have you have the safe landing, you have the soft landing of being able to come home for Sunday dinners or dinner around the table at night. And then 2, you have responsibilities and expectations. Whether it's working at the factory, working at the car wash, whether it is hauling groceries, there is still this expectation of there is a life that exists that you have to plug into. It's not the coast.
It's like you said, the Midwest is the Shire.
Yeah, well, yeah, but you have to. You don't have Hollywood to run to. You don't have the various club scenes for music and drugs or whatever. You still have a life that you have to live. And I do think that, especially if you're trying to represent them accurately, will come out in media. And so even though the language might be the same between the two areas, even though there's still going to be sexual trials in the Midwest, um, in the inland South, there's still, you just can't go too deep. Otherwise, I mean, you can, and you can wind up strung out on fentanyl and never accomplish anything. But that's very much the outlier rather than the norm.
Yeah, there's kind of
So,
a middling of it, right? Where in
yeah.
California you have like the highest highs and the lowest lows there, versus
Yes.
it is very a middling kind of thing. And you might dabble in some of these things that come over from California, but it's very different than being in it.
Yep.
Especially having spent a good amount of my time in California, it is a very very interesting place to simply be in, and what it
Yeah.
produces and what kind of lives people live out of it.
No, I think that was actually a good point. Um, did I tell you that I met the lady that invented fake nipples in California?
No, you have never told me that you met the lady who
Okay.
would. I didn't. What fake nipples? What?
It was I was in Oceanside one night. It was like 2 a.m. And she just, I don't know what she was on or what she was full of. And dude, I was sitting on a curb. I feel like I just couldn't find a motel that night. And so me and a buddy were walking around, and it's like, whatever, man. I don't know that we ever found one. I mean, we might have just kept walking through the night because you don't want to just stop.
No,
Uh,
definitely not there. You do not want to
right?
stop moving.
So, yeah, at one point in the middle of the night, man, we meet this woman, and she's got to be, I don't know, I was going to say 42, but she could have been like 28, but she's had a hard few days. Uh, so, yeah, in the midst of, because she's got to tell us this story about how she was scammed, and it's that she created fake nipples for women's bikinis because women didn't like being out there. They liked the support of the bra, but they had to let other women know that they were rocking it all natural. We were like, that's great, man. Like, man, I'm so sorry they stole from you. But
That's a Yeah, that's one of the most Californian inventions I could ever think of.
yeah, that was one of my California stories. But all right, so interesting. Yeah, this Euphoria director is throwing me off now. I will say, so going into it, the only one that I could think of that was having, or at least has the potential to be a generational representative was Eggers, and that could definitely be confirmation bias because of the circles we run in. The witch had already put him on a lot of people's radar, and they said something's going on here. The Northman came out, and it flew off like a rocket. Every white supremacist just loved this movie, and it was, make sure your sons aren't going to see this movie. And
Oh
he's
no, I
everywhere.
rather liked the Northman myself. Like I enjoyed seeing what it had put on.
Good. This is going to be a curious conversation.
Okay.
Okay, so You Can Be Anything was the boomers. Why/how is Gen X, and It Doesn't Matter is the millennials. I have, in fairness, I have only seen The Witch and The Northman from Eggers. Frankly, because after having watched those two movies, unless I get a report that it is something radically different, I don't have to see any more Eggers movies. In my mind, he builds it up and he casts this vision. And don't get me wrong, Eggers can, one, he can handle filmmaking, and two, I think it was El Templar or somebody I saw today uh, talking about how he handles the period pieces he's in, and that's 100% correct. That, frankly, that's part of what pisses me off. So whether it is these hardcore Puritan of Puritans, or whether it is the Northmen and the various clans of Northwest Europeans and how they're interacting, he builds up these wonderful worlds. He builds up these believable worlds, and he makes the stakes super high, and then he gets to the end, and from my perspective, he is laughing at the viewer as he burns it all down and says, ha ha, none of this matters, which I also think is just an outgrowth of his own nihilism.
See, I can see that for The Witch and maybe for some of his other things, and maybe it's actually a loss of it. But I think actually in The Northman, he did a pretty good job of not doing that. Because I mean,
Go on.
particularly,
Yes. State
Yeah.
your case, man.
so the ending of it in particular, where he gets the vengeance that he had sought, and he gets lifted, he's carried off by Valkyries into Valhalla. I mean, it is pagan, but the very fact that there is like very clearly in this world that he has built, like this is an actual religion that has meaning, and there are things that are transcendent beyond human beings, particularly at the end, and where he still gets the girl pregnant more or less, and his children are going to go on and carry on some great legacy beyond him. I think that in particular, that there is that element of it where that is like, this is going to happen after you, even though he dies, on the mountain fighting and taking out his
I was
father.
going to say that's his hope and his intention.
It is, but I think that it shows pretty well that it is the thing. I mean, even when it goes into like the blood memory, which has now entered into all of our vocabularies and talking about that, like there is an element there where when he has like, this is your blood memory and these are these prophecies and these are these things going on. There is clearly more meaning that I think is communicated here beyond simply nothing really matters in his particular films. Maybe just that one. The Witch I definitely see where it does very much kind of just trash Puritans, really.
Well, not just the Puritans, but what's the daughter's name? Is it Anna? No, that's the actress's. No, I forget the daughter's name. But anyway, it's like she holds on to all this stuff, and then she does get to be a witch in the end. But spoiler alerts, but if you guys are listening to this, I think you've already seen it. She gets to be a witch in the end, but now she is removed from society. She's removed from anything higher than being that which her family was already afraid of. Somebody that eats children and somebody that seeks the death of others. And I mean, maybe somebody would. I don't like Eggers movies.
Yeah,
it's as simple as that.
I liked it when I watched it, and I think it's like an objectively like well-made movie, and I think
yes,
he does
100%.
Yeah, it's like he is an excellent, like he's an auteur, for sure.
Yeah.
But and I think it was more so. It was less of what he was maybe intending to communicate, and more so what was shown on screen is often different. And I think that that's what happened with The Northman. I think that's why it resonated so well with like, the Chuds, and why so many of them liked this movie is because often in the best example of this, it's the most
the best example, what was that?
The best example of this, of where it really, sometimes you make something that you did not intend to make, and the art transcends the artist and what it's communicating and what is displayed on the screen versus like what an artist is actually trying to make. It's very retried ground, but it's Starship Troopers, where Starship Troopers, it's meant to be, fascism is bad, and it's like, and you're actually supposed to think that the bugs aren't even that bad, and this is all bad. And it's like you have very handsome, beautiful people going out and fighting disgusting aliens for their country and for their people, engaging in these things and these trials, fighting their way through and doing something that is heroic and resonates on a deeply human level. You cannot portray that negatively.
Well, so it's funny. Well, I'm saying this because it was Verhoeven. Didn't he also do RoboCop?
Yep.
Well, and it's funny. It's like he loses the plot of the source material for the movies he makes. But then maybe I'm just, an idiot. But I feel like half the time he loses the plot for the point he's trying to make. And so
Yes, no,
then
he absolutely does. Because
Robo,
RoboCop just made it look really awesome to be a
right?
cyborg cop and gun down criminals. Like that's like what you got out of it. It's
And
like
then he comes Starship Troopers, like he said, and he's going to, if the book wasn't clear enough, which one I don't think the book argues this, but some people believe that it does. But if the book wasn't clear enough, I'm going to make you understand how bad this is. Huh? That's not what we got. What we got is there's people that are sacrificing themselves for their home, and yes, those are the people that end up getting the vote. I was
yeah,
actually
and anyone who
arguing
argues
is
that with Heinlein doesn't understand Heinlein or what was going on because he was very clearly trying to portray how good military service was because he wrote it directly after the military drawdowns because he was a veteran himself and it was to instill like here's the values that come out of military service. Like it
he's a curious person though, because
he is extremely curious.
He was definitely libertarian, and
Yes.
if I remember correctly, he was relatively degenerate.
He was, yeah, he was a swinger, and
That's
he
what
wrote
I
a lot of
thought.
very strange. Like when I was in my libertarian phase, what was it? The Moon is a Harsh Mistress was one of my favorite books, and then it's like, and then you get to like he has, what is it? Not big. Polyandry is like a very common facet of their society, which is like this is kind of odd. It's
Yeah.
like you have women married to multiple men. Okay. And he tries to like
So
justify it because it's like a hot, like the society that they have is based off of prisoners who were sent to the moon. And there was an overwhelmingly heavy male population that came in. That's why they developed this system. So that way you at least had some kind of way to have progeny, even if you had to share it with another, like women could pick multiple guys. But it was also, here's my elaborate world building to justify my own weird proclivities in that regard.
yeah.
But yes, he's very, and it increases as he goes on his various degenerate morals. But he was very fascinating in terms of like what world building he would do and what he had. And I think Starship Troopers came earlier on when before he had dove head first into this.
I was going to say, even just look at how he portrays women in
This is
Starship
true.
Troopers.
Yeah, the way the women,
Women are beautiful.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and like women are better pilots or whatever he makes. Like he's odd with some of these proclivities, but I think it's still like the thing that I try to articulate and like why like I even name myself the way I do and why I carry my persona. The show Legend of the Galactic Heroes resonates with me very deeply. I love this show.
Yeah.
And I think the author is in some ways like kind of liberal and he wants you to take away that it's a fight between like what's better, a corrupt democracy or a perfect autocracy. And I think he wants you to take away in some ways that it's the democracy. But I think just purely by his pursuit of trying to tell a very good story, building out a world that's excellent, building out excellent characters, most people I think will come to the opposite conclusion, which is that wow, the military autocracy is a way better system to go by through this. And so like what I think happens with like artists and people who try to make works like that, where you could have something like, to swing it all the way back to the Northman, he might have had the intentions that you are describing, and those there might be elements of that come through it. However, the world building and the things that he put into it do not actually display that when you think about him. When you see the things that are coming through, what is coming through is a world where your legacy matters extremely deeply. His whole life is set forward because of these blood memories and these things that he experiences. He knows his future in some ways, and he's given this opportunity that like you're going to die. Like he opts to die,
so
taking out his father's killer. But he has a legacy that continues on after him, and he's sucked up again by Valkyries into Valhalla. He has an eternity to him after this because of the actions that he took, because he died fighting with the sword.
So I can grant that to some degree. And there is always this question too of how much do we give? We're not Gnostic and completely spiritual, and we're not materialists and deny the spiritual. We're walking in the in between, trying to find the straight and narrow. And so my question then is, I'm not dismissing legacy. I think that's incredibly important, and I think you want your sons, you want your whole family to talk of you after you're gone. Having said that, man, so he does this, and his wife is assaulted by barbarians in the next month, and his sons are stomped to death. Something that would have been prevented had he been there.
I mean, but is that displayed in it? Is that shown, or is that something that you're just drawing out of it?
Well, at that point, yes, and they could have, maybe they lived for 150 years apiece, and they all went to Disney World. And come on, it's already,
sure, yeah, a single mom in this environment is not going to do well
in the environment that Eggers has already built.
Sure, but he is still like but the environment that he's built has shown that like there is a spirit to things. There is the ethereal. She is like an actual prophetess who is foreseeing the future and foresees this future for the children, for these things. So these things are real and actually exist within the world that he has built. He does do a little bit to like kind of mask it on whether it is or isn't. But I think where you really see that, like, okay, this is actually happening is when he is strung up in, and he's been captured, and the Ravens come in and undo the knots for him. That is where you get full 100% confirmation that, yeah, like he's gone back and forth a bit on some of the supernatural and how real it is. When that happens,
Eggers or the character?
No, Eggers. Okay. Eggers shows that in the film, it is clearly displayed that this is where the supernatural is real, whereas all the rest of it is somewhat ambiguous. Like, you could kind of say, okay, when he's carried up by Valkyries, is this just what he's thinking when he dies? You know, how he fights like the Droger, and then he's there and he just kind of has a sword. And there's or when he's like a berserker and gets these things, well, he took the mushrooms. That one moment where he's supernaturally undone and rescued, that's where it very clearly shows. Because yes, the whole other time it's like your sword can only be drawn on night. And he's just not drawing the sword, and he's just where he's like fighting with it still sheathed in its scabbard and these other things. That one moment is the confirmation that all of this is real. It's similar to the witch, where the witch has that confirmation when, is all this actually happening? What's actually really going on? What's displayed? And then
is she talking to Black Phillip or?
Yeah, and then she talks to the goat. And then, but in this case, it's that instance where you have him tied up, he has no way of rescue, and then he is supernaturally rescued by literally a Deus Ex Machina. So and there's no other way to interpret it.
So as I understand what you're telling me is, I missed the point of the Northman because there was a supernatural element to it that I did not pick up on. And so it's not that, we know everything that's going on with his wife and children, but we know that his children do have a destiny to partake in.
Yes.
Because, okay. Interesting.
So essentially the fact that you have that one moment of confirmation of the supernatural confirms all the rest of the supernatural. It's that one tiny little miracle that they do display that is unambiguous versus, him fighting a Droger, him getting carried by Valkyries. All of these are very grand things that are happening. And when they show the Droger, it's very clear that this could have not actually happened.
And that's everything that I picked up on in the movie, that Eggers, it seemed to me when I watched it that Eggers was like, yeah, you can have these grand ideas and you can have these narratives that you participate in, but that doesn't mean they're true. It doesn't mean that there's any value in there.
He's got that ambiguity that runs through it, but
for that, Okay.
One specific one where it is pretty unambiguous that this is a supernatural thing. I believe that it's
So
ravens that come in, and I
yeah.
believe it's been a while since I've seen it, but yeah, I believe it's ravens that come in and his knots are undone.
So I will say that one convinces me to go and rewatch it, reevaluate it, and frankly, to some degree, would dismantle my generational thesis going into this stream.
Well, I'm sorry to dismantle it.
It is what it is. I mean, if I was wrong, I was wrong.
I think you're right on the theses in terms of like what is generally displayed and what is through a lot of these things. And again, like that might have been Eggers' intent through it. And it might even just be that like he wrote a scene where this guy is captured and he doesn't have a good way to get him to be uncaptured that fits this theme. And so he was forced to make it supernatural unambiguously and tried to downplay it by just making it, okay, the knots are undone and the ravens are there. And make it seem as though there's not much going on. But it is unarguable that in that moment there is something that is supernatural that is occurring, unlike every other scene that occurs in that. Which, even that might have been his intent, that you're correct at. But it goes back to what I'm saying, which is where artists sometimes, by trying to make a movie that works well, that functions, that makes sense, they often end up bringing in ideas that they did not intend to or did not think about because they're simply trying to make a good world and a good movie. And when you're making a good world, when you're making a good movie, when you're making good art, you're following natural lines and natural rules. Mm-hmm. And so you and your ideas and your ideology and all these things might have something that is, leftist or just away from reality, or you might not like reality. But when you're setting about, I'm going to make a good story here, you end up bringing the natural in because a good story is natural. And so you end up having things that you didn't actually necessarily mean to have that are shown and displayed clearly as meanings within it. And so I think in this particular instance, just that one thing where I don't have a good way to get my character out of this one instance, and I have to have something that is unambiguously supernatural occur, undoes all the unambiguity through the rest of it. Does that make sense? It makes everything else.
I think so. Yeah. So it is interesting. And I know, Dave Green has argued this. I mean, people for millennia have argued this. Scruton argues it to a degree, not as explicitly as some of us would argue, but the idea that all art of merit and of quality will ultimately be right-wing art. Which is that's too strong. Will be art that does not conflict with the truth of life.
Yeah, well, they'll typically say all art is right-wing art, but I would say that like to be truly right-wing is the pursuit of what does not actually conflict with life. I one of the things that I say is that Satan was the first leftist because he was the first one who went against the created order, went against these things, did not like reality as it was, and tried to unmake it and remake it in how he would prefer it to be. Whereas I think if you frame it in these things, to be right-wing is to accept that there are certain natural things that you are a created being, that you are finite, and that there are certain things that you cannot change, that you have to operate under, such as hierarchy and other things. Oh, you wrote an article saying there's no such thing as right-wing art. That is interesting.
Yeah. So I'm not, I was going to ask you, have you seen this?
I have not, but I will read it.
I will. So I'm not going to read it online. I won't force you guys to listen to that. But it's relatively short, and yeah, I'll send it your way because I think we're saying close to the same thing. But the tagline being propagating art as right wing is a misnomer that limits its utility and primary function, the exploration and engagement of life itself.
Yeah, it's putting the cart before the horse on that, where like the issue that I have and why I brought up Assassination Nation, for example, is
Mhm.
because he very clearly just wanted to hammer you in the face with his left-wing propaganda.
Sure.
And that's why that movie failed miserably. Whereas Euphoria does well because it just barely tones it down to where now it's and then it becomes very popular because of that. In the same way, the failing that right-wing artists have is that they think of themselves first as right-wing rather than as artists. And what actually happens when you're working on these things is that if you simply just seek to produce a good story, it will
Right.
naturally come through with all of these themes, and all of these things will just come out if you just focus first on, I want to tell a good story that has meaning to it, that has good
Mhm.
characters, that has a world that functions and makes sense. When that's what you start off from the outset, rather than like, I want to convince people of why
It's
property taxes should be low, or like why there's only, it's like, yeah,
it's the
it's
Count of Monte Cristo versus God's Not Dead.
yes, exactly. Or
Right.
so many other things. It's Lord of the Rings versus like, I don't know, just any of these other things like Lady Ballers. You can throw out as an example of the exact opposite.
I I wonder if, like, does the Daily Wire ever step back? That was Daily Wire, wasn't it? The Lady
It was.
Ballers.
It
That's what I
was.
thought. Like, do they ever step back and just say, "What are we doing?"
They actually did. Because all their movies initially were like, we're gonna have a strong female protagonist, but she likes guns. And they did this like 2 times, and then they're like, we're just gonna do Lady Ballers. And then they realized that that was absurd. But then they did something that was much more intelligent, which was just, we're just gonna adapt Stephen Lawhead's The Pendragon Cycle, which I like Stephen Lawhead a lot.
Interesting. I think, yeah. So there is a fellow who goes by Kentucky Squirrel on X, and he has been a big fan of that particular series,
Oh,
if
it's
I
great.
remember correctly.
Yeah, no, I
Interesting.
love
Okay.
Stephen Lawhead.
Yeah.
He has a deep love of Celtic mythology and is a Christian
Mm,
and melds them in a way that's extremely fascinating. Like I really like the books that he's put out. They're
gotcha.
very solid, and you can see like what he starts off with first is, I love Celtic myth. I love what I want to teach the English what England was like before the Anglos arrived, and to understand that this is a part of them, this is a part of their heritage, their culture,
Yeah.
that these are a people, and I'm going to display this eloquently. I'm going to go in depth on these things, and I'm going to make a good story that shows this particular love. And I think
Have
that
you
that
read Have you read any of Cornwell's Anglo-Saxon Chronicles?
yeah, I'm a fan of those. I like Uhtred
Okay.
and all of those.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
I'm known as an Anglo-Saxon guy among several other things. So yes, I love the Anglo-Saxon
it
Chronicles.
it was curious to me that he almost has to beat around the bush in that, and it was a focus of the time he was in, I suspect. But he hints at those things you're talking about, but never really goes deep into them.
Yeah, but he clearly, like, whatever you say, he loves English history for what he
Oh
was making.
yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
he does, I think, a really good job at displaying like the dynamics and the things that were going on. It's
yeah.
something that, God willing, if I can ever actually finish a novel, I will try to replicate, but for the American Revolution in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I'll have my first bit out by the anniversary of 1776. My first little bit I hope to have out by then, but I think it's better to actually just do the thing than talk about the thing, because then you end up
Often.
satisfied with it in your head, and that this story only exists in my head, and I need to actually put in the work to get it on paper. But yes,
Fair
I
enough.
consider myself something of an artist. I mean, you can't spell article without art, so I think of I think of my
Right.
article writing as an art.
This I had I had a buddy when I was in, and he was always he's a non-commissioned officer. You hear that? Officer.
Yeah, it's
But
kind of a similar regard where it's like I'm also an artist because I wrote these
yeah.
random little screens, but I try to elevate them by
So,
giving them a flow where it reads more like a fiction. Where I have the best articles
mhm.
I've written have been done in that way. Like I think my favorite still is The South Will Rise Again, where I build this analogy of the South representing fire in their birth at Jamestown, where if you look at like smoke and tobacco is what came out of it. And I portray a motif of stone for the Puritans where they land at Plymouth Rock, and that these
Yeah.
have like some of the characteristics of the two peoples, that I see America as having a twin founding between the two, and just writing in this way that I think communicates a lot while mostly not. I'm not getting into the taxonomy or any of these other things. I'm simply just like I see these two motifs and these two peoples, and I think that there's a lot to these things. And it's also The South Will Rise Again because I very much like the South, and I think we need to bring on more Southern characteristics and culture, and I think that would help quite a bit.
So swinging back towards
Yeah, sorry, I went all over
film.
the place on that
You're
one.
fine. No, you're fine. You're fine. One, do so. Let's start out with the hard one, or the easy one that's always asked. Do you think that film? Do you think that when a person makes a movie, that movie is a representation of the culture that they're already caught up in, or do you think there is a part wherein, and we're not talking. I mean, this is kind of good. We're not talking about the right wing movies or the left wing movies that we just spoke about, but we're talking about good movies. Do you think those good movies are a part of the culture and time that they're in, or do you think that they are foundational pieces that are building the culture that they're in?
I think it's both. It's sort of
Okay.
you could throw an Ouroboros on that, and that's probably what you
Okay.
have, where it's simultaneously building the culture. But like for example, I think the easiest one to point to would be Tolkien, honestly, where it's very clear that I think echoes of what he experienced in World War One, of what was going on in this era, what was going on in this time, of what he had seen as kind of a loss of some of these things, and what he's writing about this epic of good and evil, when at a time
Mhm.
where there was a lot of moral nihilism, where there was a lot of ambiguity on these, especially after World War One, where
Yeah.
it's like, what was even the point of this? We lost so many lives and so many people, and there was no like clear, like it's really hard to say that like the Germans were horribly evil or like the English were the good guys or any of these things out of it. It was
Right.
just this utterly brutal loss of life with very little clear moral side of who was right or if we even gained anything
Mhm.
out of this. And so he writes this epic in the face of that, where that is what is on display. It is a very clear delineation of this is unambiguously the good guys. These are unambiguously
Yes.
evil. There is good and evil. These things do exist. And he's writing in
Yeah.
reflection of those times. And I think at the same time, he has utterly shaped what everyone thinks of as fantasy, of what people think of as these things. And
Yeah.
so I think that's a perfect display of where he's not only is reacting to what he is around, but he is directly shaping the culture of literature of what people think of. I think he did a lot to bring back, I think, like his moral, like hardcore good, hardcore evil, who is what.
Right.
I think that even gets displayed in like how people view World War II after that, where it now becomes like a very like, I think now there's a lot of people that very much like to revise this. I think that there's a lot of value in not treating the Germans as though they were just unambiguously completely evil and had nothing to them.
Right.
I don't know how much you want to get into that topic, but that's a whole aside.
Right.
But
No, if we didn't go down that road, it would just be because it wasn't super applicable. But it's not. No, that's not too spicy.
okay.
Yeah, but no, it is. So Moorcock and Martin, you know, they came out against that, and
Yeah, you're talking about George
said
R.R.
it was
Martin.
yeah, George R. R. Martin, and then Michael Moorcock.
Yeah,
You know,
George R. R. Martin's fascinating because I think his actual best work was A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. and that whole series, because it's really funny because he makes Game of Thrones and it is exactly that to a degree where I do not like Game of Thrones because
Yeah.
he, especially like his just how much he wants to beat on like you're not able to be just a good guy, like,
Yes.
and I cannot stand that whatsoever.
Yep.
But I think when you're looking at like what he made into Night of the Seven Kingdoms, he actually kind of retreads that and he makes just like this extremely like clear, this is a hero who's trying to be a hero, who's trying to live up to these values, who displays them and succeeds while doing so. And I think that showed through the HBO show, which I far preferred to any Game of Thrones thing that has ever been made. Like A Night of the Seven Kingdoms was excellent. It was one of my favorite shows that I've seen made. I hope to God that they don't ruin it with the follow-ons, but it was so good just to see like
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
I've not.
It's worth watching because it is literally just like this guy who desperately
because it was Martin. I had no
Yeah.
intention of
understandable, and I wouldn't have either, and that's why I held off. But it was enough people on right-wing Twitter were glazing it that I was like, okay, I'm gonna give it a shot. And I was like, wow, this is actually really, really good. Because it does just unambiguously tell a hero's journey of a man who just wants to live up to these ideals and be a good knight. And he's confronted with a lot of the things that Martin wants to talk about, which is like, here's all these knights that do not live up to the values that they're meant to, that are much higher status. And he's got this guy who's extremely poor, who has no house to his name, who just has an old beat up set of armor and a couple horses. And that's what makes him a knight. And he's like displaying the virtues and the things that you're supposed to be and the things that you're supposed to do, and is fighting for those. And he succeeds at doing that. And it's a wonderful story just to see that, where it's like a man striving to be a knight that I think runs through like the minds of young men, where they want to live up to these values and these things that it's imprinted on you. I mean, like, you know what it was like. We were both military. You kind of envision yourself as like, this is what I want to be. You know, you want to live up to those kind of that warrior virtue.
Well, and I do think that was an aspect of the Northman that I did appreciate, in that legacy does mean something. And, you know, a high ideal means something. And so, yeah, for me, as I walked away from it, and like I said earlier, I think you've schooled me enough on it that I'm going to actually go and rewatch it and reconsider these things as I remembered it. And as I remembered having watched it, it was this idea that these ideas are going through his head, and he has a wife and 2 children. And Eggers was laughing as he presents him chasing the idea of legacy rather than caring for that which was already in front of him. Which, again, I'm willing to consider that was the incorrect reading of it, based on things you said earlier. So that also runs us into the idea. One, do you think then that idea of the millennial cinema being nothing matters is legitimate, or do you think maybe there is more hope in it than I originally presented? Where do you see millennial cinema and millennial media headed?
I think that you're correct in terms of what they're displaying. And that's where I'm getting at with Eggers as well, is that I think that that's what he wanted to communicate and what he intended to. But I think that quite often things that you do not intend bleed through when you are simply making something that is good, and works as a good story and is an artistic piece, and does speak to the, you know, the human condition, you could say. And so regardless of what they try to make or what they're trying to say, these things do come through these stories.
That's a super curious point, because it does almost. Are you familiar with Praise of Folly?
No.
So he has a heuristic that, or at least he was the first one that I heard this heuristic from, and it was something that I had sort of played with before, but I hadn't actually put words to it. And so once I heard him say this, I was like, That's it. That's what I'm trying to form in my head. But just the idea that energy, for things to stay in motion, there still has to be a sustained amount of energy involved. And so it's basically the idea. Um, it is the metaphysical explanation of what Edward Dutton talks about. IQ is dropping, and there will be a right wing resurgence, not even because people want to be right wing, so to speak, as much as uh, degeneracy will burn itself out. It has no energy to continue and stay in momentum. And so all of that is a hefty way of me getting to this idea of, it does seem that the approach to the church and to metaphysical notions is growing these days. And so yeah, it's easy to talk about the spiritual but not religious, and like laugh about girls doing with daggum horoscope and all that. Like, yeah, I get it. It's goofy and all that. But the flip side of that is that there is a willingness to consider that the veil is thinning, and that there is more to this life than the science that we were initially fed as children, and that boomers and X were brought up in. And so, yeah, I think what you're hitting on might be interesting, in that we will start seeing these things creep in. This idea of what supernatural forces, what supernatural impacts were there that maybe we can't put words to. Maybe we won't say it was Odin, or we won't say it was Christ or whatever, but we are finding ourselves, because we see that the sexual revolution and degeneracy is burning itself out. Now it's a question of what's next and what can possibly fill that void.
No, I'm in complete agreement, because I don't think that materialism is capable of giving any kind of meaning whatsoever to people. And so I think what you largely see right now is that leftists and liberals and those types gravitate much more towards this kind of view of it's hard to say, but they do have like a kind of religion to them now, especially where they'll talk about spirits. And you can even see this in, like, again, I hate to talk about more about transgenders because it's very much hit on, but they have this idea that is inherently metaphysical to them, where they accept this idea that you were like born in the wrong body, or they'll throw out these things that do speak to some kind of metaphysical quality going on, or they'll talk about how like all religions are the same, that kind of get at this, or they'll be very into like spirituality and all of these other things. I think that runs much more through them in terms of what they're trying to do or say. And it's a weird kind of like paganism that kind of like brings in everything, a kind of polytheism that kind of says everyone's okay, that runs through a lot of what they're doing. And I think it underpins a lot, because I don't think you can subsist off of atheism and materialism. I don't even think atheists are true atheists. They always have some kind of idea of concepts of morality and things that are non-material that they hold to. They will always,
if you are a materialist, nothing should matter.
Yeah, nothing means anything. You're just a bag of meat on a ball. But all of them will have things that they think are objectively moral or right or wrong. They will still argue all of these things. None of these things can exist in a purely material world. Now, on the right, I think that we saw that like churches and Christianity has done a very poor job of carrying on a lot, that it has conformed very much to the modern in many ways, or it has failed in so many. And so many people, I think, also just lack identity, where all these things that they were attached to and a part of, we really had like a severance, where you have this, I think it ties into deracination, where you've lost who you are, and all you were either a pure isolated individual, and even your own family means nothing. But you were also a member of the race, the human race. You know, everyone's a global citizen, and that's all you had. It was these two polar extremes, where you're this perfectly unique individual, and you belong to the globe and the world. And I think, as especially like young men, are working through these things. That's why so many gravitate to all these different churches, or why you see this on the right where guys are like hardcore into like whatever church they found that gave them some hint of meaning, and think that that's everything. That's the whole world. That's all that matters, is the fact I'm a Catholic, I'm an Orthodox, I'm a Lutheran, I'm this or that. You see it the same where it's like, I kind of run into these where it's like Anglo-Saxonism or these things. Like, I think it's where a lot of the pagans actually derive out of, because they learned race first as an identity that they have, and now they have essentially built a religion around their race, because race, again, can only have meaning if there's something that is outside of it. And so they start to return to, well, my bloodline had these particular religions, therefore I'm going to follow these religions. Like, all of us are finding bits and pieces where we are like we said, like the veil is thinning,
to plug back in.
Yeah.
Yep. Perfect.
Yeah. You're trying to plug back in. You're finding these hints of things. And because you have been so outside of it, you have found like the barest hint of like identity. And because you found that first, it's like you took one step and you thought you climbed a mountain. You thought you have the whole world now. And there's so much more to it. Like again, it's why I try to hit on these things. Like, none of these things are in isolation. All of these things are a part of an identity. You can't base it off of solely one thing. And I think that that's what we're hitting on, and that's where we're coming to. If that's, does that make sense?
No, it does. It does. And so, to cap all this off, because I think that's actually probably a great place to start putting a bow on this and tying it up. To see how these things start sneaking in and transcendent ideas being pursued, I think one I think you're correct, and I think we will start seeing more of that within millennial media. But then two, I look forward to that. And so, of last note, to talk about that idea, it will be interesting to see how these new Ager films finish up and where he goes as a director. And if we see more and more of this popping in, because if it's true that he's working on a new Christmas Carol, if it's true that he is working on a sequel to Labyrinth, this is going to be these are going to be very curious worlds that he finds himself in.
Yeah, no, I agree that I'm kind of, I don't think that that's going to be a very good movie in terms of what will be communicated in A Christmas Carol. Like I said, I think The Northman is in spite of maybe his intentions that it shines
Fair
through.
enough.
To cap it off,
I will say you've given me the best argument for it.
That's good. Yeah. To cap it off a bit, because there was one last line that I wanted to go on. I think especially like with young guys, as they're like working through identity, and this is something, I've done a lot of history and genealogy. I think a lot of people can latch onto, again, like I said, the first thing, and I think it's why you have people who are like super fascinated by like Germany in the 1940s, why that's so big, or like Franco, if they want to be slightly less edgy, or some of these other things. They find like something that resonates with them.
The esoteric ones are all about the Iron Guard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Cordno was one of the ones that I was fascinated with. The Romanians were quite interesting, but I think that the reason why that you see people hitting on this is because they've lost so much, and these guys seem to hold it up. Yeah. However, what they make the mistake of is that all of these were representations of their particular, like you could say, biosphere.
Yes,
they were very particular to these peoples. And this might resonate to some degree with you. However, it's kind of unnatural to hold up these foreign groups and ideals as much as you do. Now, we certainly share a lot more with them than we do with, say, I don't know, Japan or India or China. And so it's less strange than
Northwest Europeans.
Yeah, they're all Northwest Europeans, right. Or the Romanians are certainly not, but they pretend to be Romans.
Yes, correct.
But you're closer to them. But I think this is why, like, I harp so much on the founders and the Americans and the Anglos and these things, because I think you will find far more resonating with you out of the particular lines that you come from and from your own people, and finding that, than you will in others. And that's where I want to cap it off on. basically do
Yeah.
genealogy, learn your ancestry, find these things out, study your people, study your history. You will find a lot to resonate with.
Yes, and just to make what he's implicitly saying a little bit more explicit, at the end of the day, what happened is our Volk left Europe and they came here and they became Americans. So when we're reading about those founders and when we're reading about the stock that came over here, there are reasons they made those choices rather than staying on the continent, or more specifically, especially for North America, or staying within the United Kingdom.
So yep, exactly. And those lines will resonate more with you than others, and that's what you should hold more to. And you will find more meaning and more depth to you in those. So yes, read about them.
Perfect. All right, sir. Well, where can everybody find you?
I'm on Twitter at the that I have at Kaiser Lohengram. I post a lot. I write articles on occasion. Definitely check them out. I have a Substack as well. That's linked in the bio. You can find me there. Always happy to talk to Wandering Panda, one of my favorite shows to be on.
You're too kind. Well, I appreciate it. To all our listeners, thanks for hanging in there, guys. Arthur, we appreciate you being on earlier. And yeah, I will try and make sure those links get updated in the description. And y'all have a good evening. Adios. Thanks, Kaiser.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to be on. Are we still on air? It says on air. Oh. Leave.